Good morning and thank you for joining today's webinar. I am here with the lovely Shan Metcalf from InventoryBase. We are going to do a Q&A at the end of the session, so if you do have any questions, please pop them in the question box and we'll try to answer as many as possible. And this is also being recorded, so you can request a copy of the recording too at the end. So I'll now hand it over to you, Shan.
Lovely, thank you so much, and welcome everybody. Thank you indeed for your time. Hopefully I'm going to only keep you around about 30 minutes, but this is going to be recorded, as already said, so that if for any reason you want to go back over any of the items that I'm going to be talking about, you can do, and also ask any questions either now or later on. So how can we achieve a safer PRS? So we've got housing quality goals now in place from the government. We're meant to be getting there for 2030, but we've also got the abolition of section 21, and really they're against each other in regards to, on one hand, we're going to be saying that it's going to be difficult and more difficult to be able to evict tenants or deal with issues, but on the other side we want to have more say in regards to how housing is actually maintained and managed all the way through the tenancy. So it's a bit of a juxtaposition. So just a bit of context, there's over 4.61 million rented homes as we stand at the moment, give or take, and 21% of those homes in the PRS are described as non-decent, and I'll tell you exactly what I mean by non-decent in a moment. And the government itself has committed to halve the number of non-decent rented homes by 2030. The fact that we're already in 2024 gives us 6 years to be able to do that. So this is a bit of a sobering number. That's how many homes currently that we would have to bring up to spec to get them out of the non-decent level, 968,100, and that is just done on a percentage of that 21% of 4.61. So there is a likelihood that that's actually going to be a lot bigger, and there's going to be a lot more issues coming forward. So that is just a number, but even that in itself is quite staggering. So the clock is ticking. So we've got to understand the scope of the issue to be able to understand, okay, so what do we need to do about it? So let's have a look at the definition of non-decent home. So this is where properties with deficiencies like inadequate heating, dampness, poor insulation, and structural disrepair. And structural disrepair is about where they have crumbling walls, they've got unstable roofing, deteriorating foundations, but fundamentally opposing safety risks and creating discomfort for the occupants. Now, clearly on this picture, I hope that we don't have properties as bad as this, but we do have properties which are not fair and are not safe for people to be in. And dampness and mould, so excessive moisture from poor ventilation or waterproofing can cause mould growth on surfaces, posing health risks like respiratory issues and allergies. And this is where we came to be in regards to AWIB's law. So AWIB is the little boy that died because of the issues found in the home where there was mould and other issues. This was in the social housing sector, but it's also going to be very prevalent within the PRS as well. So it's not something that is unusual to our industry, but equally it's now come up to the fore because of what happened to this little boy, but also to many other families right across the industry. And the thing is also, now it's harder to heat your homes. We're getting colder winters, hotter summers. We're finding dampness and mold becoming more and more of an issue. So this isn't going to stop. I think that's the key element here. We are not going to see a deterioration unless we do something. We will see a deterioration unless we do something, but we won't see a change, and a positive change, unless we do something. We've also got inadequate heating and insulation. So non-decent homes lack proper heating, insulation, and obviously with the high energy bills, even though we've seen a reduction as of the 1st of April, we are still seeing at a very high level. We know that people aren't heating their homes. We know that they can't afford it, and the kind of like option they've got is to pay the rent, feed their family, or heat their homes. And this affects very much the vulnerable groups like children and elderly who can become ill because of the inconsistency of warmth within the property. You've also got poor ventilation. So this worsens the mold growth, the indoor air quality, which is part and parcel of, if you look at it from a HHSRS point of view, and fitness for human habitation. And a lot of non-decent homes are lacking these proper ventilation options. So air doesn't flow, there's musty odours, it creates more issues around respiratory health risks, And obviously anything that's got mold in it will have spores, which then could be breathed in. And again, from a child point of view, from a vulnerable person point of view, maybe with a compromised immune system, these are all really big problems. We've also got electrical safety standards, so outdated wiring, overloaded circuits. Now, EICRs obviously have captured a lot of that, and we've had a great big surge of activity in getting us into the right place so that we're compliant with EICR. But it doesn't mean that things don't happen in between that report and the next report. 5 years is a long time for things to go wrong and not get sorted. And of course, then we're also looking at a population in regards to landlords who are not compliant, who kind of live under the radar and not like the majority of agents in the PRS that care about their tenants, care about the properties. So we are going to see instances where there's going to be fire, and obviously with the Grenfell fire, that really brought everything to the fore of housing safety and how we can manage that. And there's also issues in regards to electrocution and endangering occupant safety by the risks posed by electrical fires, or items they're bringing into the property maybe to heat them that are maybe cheaper than heating it through gas, but equally pose a risk because maybe they've not been PAT tested. So these are the kind of things that you really do need to be thinking about. And lack of basic amenities, so things like plumbing, toilets, safe water. We have Legionella risk assessments, but I know from my own personal experience within the industry, these are not being done, and yet they are a legal requirement. And all of this can compromise the comfort of the home, but also violating an occupant's right to a dignified living. I mean, toilets should be, a mainstay, but we've come across properties where toilets haven't been working, they've been reported, but they're still not working. There might be only one for that particular property, and you've got adults there. So of course, then what are they meant to do? So these are all the kind of things that said are considered as non-decent. So shedding the light on the current landscape, in regards to rental prices, in the months up to January 2024, prices have increased by 5.9%, and that's a provisional estimate. There are some areas, depending on where you are, what your income level is, that will actually be higher. And certainly private rental prices in London are accounting for almost a third of UK rental expenditure. So if you think about it, already you've got a potential impact on the affordability of the tenant to be able to maintain, heat the home, look after the home, because of so much of their income going on to rental. And also there's a housing availability issue. And as here, Guy Gittins from Chief Executive of Foxton said, this is the worst balance between supply and demand we've ever seen. It's only going to get worse. And in April, they actually said that 97,000 tenants were looking for only 2,000 available properties. So we know that there's issues in regards to the void properties, in as much as that we used to have 2, sometimes 3 weeks, which is never good for a landlord, but gives more choice to a tenant. Now we're getting to the point where a tenant's leaving in the morning, and new tenants come in the afternoon, so the void is less there. There's less properties in the market, so we've got more people chasing it. So having 97,000 tenants looking for only 2,000 available properties tells you there's going to be all of those 95,000 tenants looking elsewhere, trying to find properties, and that's when they tend to get pushed into the darker recesses of the PRS, where they are going to go for homes that are not safe, that are not decent, because they don't have a choice. And Zoopla, as you can see here, they're saying that there's a 33% lower number of properties being listed than before the pandemic. And as this hasn't changed, any homes that are rented out as soon as they're listed is causing that to become more and more of a problem. And the other issue we've also got is landlords are leaving the industry, and we know that for a fact. So the implications of Section 21 abolition and housing quality, obviously they're going to pose challenges, certainly to tenants. And this is about housing insecurity. What happens due to the fact if the house is non-decent, but then the Section 21 is then abolished, what does the landlord do about that? So it makes then the tenants, certainly from their point of view, feeling very, very insecure. There's a vulnerability certainly within disputes, in as much as that there's a lot of pushing from different angles from the government. On one hand, you're saying we need to give people housing that's decent, which is quite right. But on the other hand, we're saying that with the abolition of Section 21, landlords are going to have less opportunity to actually either make those housing decent, because maybe they need to move the tenants out and the tenants won't go, or the tenants are being obstructive, or there's issues. And also that means that there's limited housing options, because the fact is, if you've got so many properties, if you imagine 986,100 properties being taken out of circulation because they need to be brought up to a decent standard, where does all of those tenants go? And obviously, anything that impacts on the quality of living for a tenant is going to cause problems in regards to disputes, in regards to potential legal action, that you might end up getting trading standards involved. It might be ombudsman, it might be more deposit disputes. So these are all challenges, and not necessarily just about tenants, but certainly what tenants are facing, because obviously they're looking at it from their point of view. You know, what happens to me if this all goes ahead? And as we said, that's affordability. So obviously, if compliant costs escalate for landlords, increases rent, there's more disruptions for renovations, obviously scarcity of decent housing, and obviously the impact on poor housing can have on the physical and mental health and well-being. I mean, stress and illness can actually actually stress more than anything can cause illness, more so than the actual illnesses itself. But obviously, landlords are also affected by this. You've got the loss of flexibility due to removal of Section 21. You've got, I said, problem tenants without swift eviction options, so that increases that risk. And then you've got the legal complexity. So under Section 8 for evictions, you know, what is going to replace Section 21? Will we have housing courts already in place? You know, what are we going to do in order to manage this? And obviously, that impacts on the housing supply as landlords continue to exit the market, as we said earlier. And landlords are going to have challenges as well. You know, there's a lot of rhetoric about the fact that, you know, you've got big fat cat landlords, you know, to coin a phrase, and yet most of them are individual landlords. They've got small portfolios, they've got pensions, and all these cost to the landlords for any changes to make the houses decent. And my experience is, in the main, landlords want to make sure the house is decent, but you know, there are pockets where they don't, or they don't understand it, or they don't have the money. So anything that will change that financial, what was I going to say? Anything that will impact on their financial obligations and abilities can disrupt how they manage their house. You've also got the disruption to rental income during property upgrades, because obviously they're not going to get the money whilst the tenant is not there, and they could also end up paying more for the tenant to be moved out while these changes are being made, or they could then be issued with the Section 21 to give them the space to do that. But again, if we take Section 21 out of the equation, then we've got a bigger problem. And obviously all this potentially goes to the possibility of rent increases. And again, we've got to cover the cost somehow. So, you know, how are we going to manage that? So reducing the percentage of non-decent homes in the PRS. So to actually achieve that goal of halving that number, that 21%, that 986,100, we need a multifaceted approach and some key steps to take. Now, obviously, I appreciate the view on your screen is very detailed. There's a lot right up, but you'll get a copy of this, so don't worry. But I'm just going to hit the main points. It's going to strengthen regulations. So make sure that we have better enforcement mechanisms to adhere to minimum standards. But then we can also add a bit of a carrot to the stick, you know, offer financial tax breaks, grants, or low interest rate loans to landlords so that they can invest and they feel they can invest, and it's not too difficult from a cost point of view to be able to do what they know is right, but maybe they just not be able to do that. And that means not imposing excessive financial burdens on the landlords, and of course then naturally the tenant when it comes to paying the rent. Empowering tenants. Now, some people roll their eyes about this, but greater tenant rights and resource to hold landlords accountable is a good thing, but it needs to be managed and it needs to be balanced. So this could involve providing information on tenants' rights, establishing tenancy advocacy groups, and offering legal assistance. Now, a lot of that is already in place, and some people would say it's too much towards the tenant, but you know, if you have a reasonable conversation with a tenant, if you have a reasonable relationship with all the different stakeholders involved in how tenants are managed and supported, then you can see and gain progress. But by denying them that ability just actually makes the issue worse. So it's about how can we work with them. And a lot of that is about education and awareness. So understanding what a landlord needs to do from a legislation point of view, but also from the tenant's point of view as well. And get the public on side, because the public at the moment think landlords again are just there for the money. They don't care about tenants, which is not my experience in the main. But we need to educate. So we need better programs to help landlords for their responsibilities, but also tenants as well as to recognise not just their rights but their responsibilities as well, and stop browbeating the landlord and actually support them instead. And all this requires collaborative efforts. So we've got to look towards, local authorities, housing associations, industry stakeholders, and community organisations. It's about bringing best practice, pooling our resources, coordinating efforts, and targeting the high need areas, so that we're not constantly going for the quick, easy wins like we do and we see with licensing. And obviously targeted interventions, you could say licensing helps that, but they're too much of a blanket now. There's too many selective licenses going on. So it almost becomes the fact that the whole industry just needs licensing because that's where we're going. And it doesn't then necessarily tackle the non-decent homes, because even though landlords are paying councils for these licenses, there's not much evidence to say that actually they're using that money to actually enforce any of the legislation. But we could also focus on things like investment, regeneration projects, incentives and community development. And I know for a fact that Property Mark industry and agents and members are very keen on engaging in the local community and doing it very successfully, albeit in small pockets. So we need to widen that. And then technology solutions. Obviously, there's no way I would have this webinar without talking about InventoryBase, but it's any technical ability to be able to give the solutions to agents, to landlords, to tenants to be able to maintain the property. That's through property inspections, monitor compliance, and facilitate the document journey. Create that golden thread so that reporting of property conditions are to the right people at the right time with the right mechanisms to be able to manage those, maintain them, and create that transparency that everybody wants. All of this will require continuous monitoring and evaluation. So the mechanisms for ongoing monitoring need to be digital. They need to be available to anybody that needs that. And that is what the government is trying to push forward, is that digitisation. And that's one of the reasons, from an InventoryBase point of view, we're involved in the Open Property Data Association. One of the key things there is about transparent data, as about showcasing the consumer journey, both on sales and lettings all the way through. So it's very clear, it's digitized, it's open and easy for information share where it's needed, so that we can speed up the process, not only just on buying and selling houses, but also speed up the process on letting and making sure that they're held to the compliant requirements in regards to legislation. And all of these interventions are based on changing needs and emerging challenges. So this isn't a one-fix-all thing. This has got to be continuous. This is a long-term, for life kind of plan, really. So how can technology support agents? So one of the clear things is compliance tracking tools, digital record keeping, and that's something we do very well at InventoryBase. It's about offering digital platforms that is robust for agents to maintain comprehensive records of things like transactions and contracts and compliance related documents, your risk assessments, and make sure that that storage is there but easy to retrieve from, because again, the government wants to see the documents digitized, but they also want to easy access. They want to be able to create a golden thread that is no barriers, nothing really causing a problem, so that all the required stakeholders have access when they need it. But from an agent point of view, this means you can then showcase at an instant, we are compliant. We're compliant with legislation, with rules, with Property Mark Code of Conduct, and also what is right in regards to safety and looking after people. And this also includes automated maintenance reminders, so that you can know when things need to be fixed, maybe on the scheduling side of things, but also react to it when you need to. So for argument's sake, InventoryBase has integration with Fixflow. So within their fault tree, you can itemize the issues within the report and then be able to pull that through into Fixflow and then to be managed either by them or our other integration partner, which is Safe2. And all this allows you to track maintenance and tasks, and you really keep on top of the property repairs and routine upkeep. And this means then, if you're maintaining the property, not just when you're told to, but all the time, both pre-pipeline before you get it by doing a fitness for human habitation assessment, all the way through the property journey and also the tenants that occupy that property, then that means you're always compliant. So therefore you're not having to retrofit, which is one of the hardest things to do and also most costly. But also you've got to think about interconnected solutions. So we talk a lot about integrations, but all of this is about streamlining your inspection protocols, and that's something we've got with InventoryBase Connect. So with our solution, agents can utilise the tools to conduct the property inspections, document their findings, add the photos and notes, but then generate those comprehensive reports so that in real time, you've got those reports, you can act on those reports, and the actions that you've got coming from those reports can go into the various scheduling, your CRMs, your fixed flows, your safe twos, all your type of systems. You can then manage those. So again, you've got that transparency, but also then you're not holding up the process. If something needs to be fixed and fixed now, especially if it's a category 1 hazard, so that you're not putting a tenant's life at risk, and also you're not putting the property at risk. But all of this includes and needs investment. So we need better investment from a technology point of view to support agents, invest in affordable housing initiatives, and use data-driven market analysis to be able to predict where we're going to have hotspots of issues, where things are going right, and how we can also learn, but also how we can invest in the opportunities and develop strategies that we can all use. So all of this will help address affordability challenges and the challenges we're seeing in the PRS. And technology is not something to shy away from, it's something to embrace. It's not onerous, and now we've got the impact of AI. We can do things much quicker, much smarter. We're learning all the time. So as AI learning, we're learning. All this enables you to collaborate with your stakeholders right away across the stakeholder spectrum in regards to who's kind of in your golden thread, who you're working with and how you're working with. And this is also including like government, non-profit organisations, anybody that's involved in getting those developments, those affordable housing sorted, revitalising the community and assisting the housing sector, the private sector, to be able to manage our portfolios and our stock. And for me, and I'm very passionate about this, every non-decent home represents a family and an individual whose quality of life is compromised. So we're talking about real people. And if we have a fair PRS, that means we're supporting the well-being of tenants and also supporting their dignity. And we are moving closer to 2030. We've got 6 years, so we need to work together. We've got to turn this commitment into a reality and ensure that every individual and every family has access to safe, decent and affordable housing. And that is something that's very much well within our capabilities as agents, as suppliers, as stakeholders, as the industry, and certainly as Property Mark members. So the question right at the very beginning is, can we achieve a safer PRS? I believe we can, very much so, but we need to work together. We need to look at the resources, we need to look at the technology, the support, look at our stakeholders, look at our partners, and see how we can work in a very holistic way so that we've got great houses, happy, safe tenants, which will equal happy landlords, and also you as agents as well, so that when it comes to building your portfolio, creating and building your pipeline and sustaining that pipeline going forward, it means you've got all the right components in place to be able to say, yes, we support landlords who provide a safe, clean, decent home. And despite impacts of, say, Section 21 and also the requirements of decent home standards, which is also going through a consultation at the moment, it means we are there, we're prepared, we're ready, and our focus is on about safety and decency. And anybody, including me as a current tenant, will naturally gravitate towards an agent who displays all those attributes, has really got my interests at heart. Obviously, you're going to have the landlords, but you're also going to be thinking about me rather than me as a byproduct of someone I need to get into the house to then be able to then move on to my next property to get that space filled. And certainly for myself, from InventoryBase point of view, we want to have a safer housing industry. So that's why we're supporting supporting a safer housing industry for all. And that is in conjunction with what we're doing with Property Mark as an industry supplier. So I hope that's given you a really good snapshot of what it is that we're trying to do, certainly from an InventoryBase point of view, provide you the technology, provide you with the ability to manage all of your regulatory compliance management issues in regards to property, and help you build a much safer housing industry. So you'll be rather pleased that that's me done. So if you do have any questions, I'll be very happy to take them.
Thank you, Sian. Yeah, we do have a couple of questions. So the first one is there any legislation relating to the PRS is only as good as the enforcement? Currently, this is patchy at best. What efforts to uniform enforcement with the legislation objectives are being made?
So, I mean, that's one of the biggest questions. I mean, we know that, and I've seen housing is, councils are actually at the moment trying to recruit environmental health officers and housing officers, but there's just not enough boots on the ground. So we've got to reimagine this. I think there's much better ways of dealing with it in regards to within our own industry, within Property Mark, to be able to manage it. And what we need is almost like a task force of its own that has got qualified individuals who can go out, can inspect properties on a third-party, non-biased kind of basis, so that there's no vested interest in that property over and above decent home and standards and the regulatory compliance, and then be able to then have that task force group work across the industry, but also directly with the government as well. And we can certainly help with that from an agent point of view, from a technology point of view, from InventoryBase point of view, by providing all of the information to be able to then give that over to our stakeholders, to our councils, to the government, to say, okay, this is, what we could do if we had the right infrastructure and the right authority to be able to do that. Until all of that is in place, until we've got some better mechanism for managing all of this compliance and legislative oversight, we're going to be in exactly the same boat. If we take Section 21 out, we insist on those non-decent home standards being brought in, and reducing that number, we're going to be at loggerheads. And then who then says, well, whether that's right or wrong, unless you've got like a council coming in. So it's going to be quite difficult. And I think in some respects, what we're doing is we're kind of like solving one problem, but then creating another one, because we're saying you've got to do this, but then there's no one then holding us to account. So I know Property Mark are doing a lot of work in regards to upskilling agents. They're doing more webinars, more training to really get them to understand exactly what is required and how to do it. But then there needs a support mechanism there as well as that oversight. So I think unless we've got that trifecta of support within the industry, it's going to be very much bitten. We're still going to have pockets and issues going forward, and it just won't resolve it. We'll end up creating one issue when we're solving another, so we're still going to be unbalanced.
Okay, thank you. Another question, with the abolishment of Section 21, how do we see this affecting student lettings with fixed term tenancies?
Well, with the fixed term tenancies, I know that's a real big bone of contention, especially comes to the student market, to HMO market. The thing is, if you've got a student that can literally just be able to, not book out the property like it does at the moment, i.e. on a 6-month contract, they can go at any given time, but then they've got other people in there and they can't necessarily bring them in. It's going to impact that, but also it's going to impact the want and ability of the landlord to actually get into that sector, to be able to provide those properties for those student tenants. And it's going to again create a disparity in control in regards to, it'll be more that tenants have got rights, landlords less, but then landlords will be held more to account, because then they can't manage the tenants because of all the issues that might come with that particular demographic. And it's not always the same with students, I find. I've come across a lot of students that are actually really, really good, but equally I've come across ones that are not so great, and then mum and dad have to come in and to help sort it all out. So I think the Section 21, as it stands at the moment, I know the industry is looking at it, is saying, look, this is not really going to work. You really do need to consult with agents, with Property Mark, with the bodies that are overseeing the PRS, to really help understand exactly what the impacts are, and also listen to agents when they're giving the government some ways of mitigating those to actually make it more fair and more balanced and more manageable and workable, because that's at the end of the day what we want. Otherwise we'll just see loads of dictation, landlords leaving, or the landlords that stay are below par standard because there's no one there to hold them to account.
Perfect, thank you. That concludes today's questions. So if you do think of any other questions, you can email us on courses.events@propertymark.co.uk. and you can also request a copy of the recording. Alternatively, you can contact InventoryBase directly if you have any further questions. So thank you for your time today, Sian.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hope to see you at the Oxford conference on Thursday as well. Thank you all.
Will do.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.